Greetings to all. I want us to reflect on the story of Joseph today. And so we will go straight to the book of Genesis chapter 37. I am following a thread which I was just thinking about today, and so I decided let me share my thoughts on the story of Joseph. Joseph is a young man when we meet him in this story, just over 17 years of age, still a teenager in a way. And he has a background that many of us can identify with or have in common, because he comes from a very dysfunctional family. That goes back to in the genealogy of his family as far back as the Bible gives us information. Even his very own family, parents, that is, his siblings, and the number of women that were involved in this family, the children from different mothers, it resulted in some dysfunctionality in the family. We find him being the highly favored child of his father Jacob, later on that we know as Israel. And this favoritism that he receives from the father, because the father had this son, Joseph, when he was of old age. So he tended to love him more than his siblings. And this was not without notice from his siblings. And so we find his siblings are very unhappy about this, such that they took even notice of a special court that his father presented him with. It actually created more unhappiness, bitterness between the siblings. It's not only that, but we do notice in the family history that there is a lot of unhappiness amongst the family members because of a number of things. Such is the nature of our relationships, most of us, our families. I am not aware of a family that has no dysfunctionality of some sort. It may not be perceived by the immediate family members, but when I'm talking in the context of family, I'm talking of immediate family plus the extended family members. And such is a family. So we find Joseph in this kind of setup. So he's got a history that many of us inherit this kind of history, and we inherit it from wherever we're born. By the way, we don't choose family. We find by default we belong to such and such a family. And the point I'm trying to, the lesson that I'm trying to get from following this story is the fact that we can choose a different direction regardless of our circumstances, regardless of what disadvantages, regardless of the dysfunctionality that we find ourselves in the respective families where we come from. We can choose to say pain stops here. We can choose to follow the Lord. And such was what Joseph chose. So we pick up the story in verse 5 of Genesis chapter 37, where it says, this is now other than the fact that there was already unhappiness amongst the siblings, that he was a favorite son or to the father. They also hated him again now for his fact that he had these dreams which they considered them strange. In verse 5, we take the story. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding sheaves in the field. Then, behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers say to him, shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Verse 9. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Unquote. This is the beautiful story of Joseph and how God was speaking to his situation, regardless of the experiences that he was going through. The Bible is clear that God was with Joseph. He was such a fine young man. I wouldn't accredit his position to his own doing necessarily, because he didn't choose this favoritism. It was done by his father for whatever reasons that he had. What we find in the account, which is clear, is that from time to time Joseph reported the misdeeds by his brothers, which he found were not in order. And it gives an impression that he was a fine young man who wanted to do right. And even in the dreams that he dreams, they are very clear that they were pointing to something great about this young man. But as we go down the story, we realize that the siblings are not so impressed by the fact that this young man seemed to suggest to them through his dreams that he was going to be in charge, or they would bow down to him. Even his father acknowledges that you seem to suggest through the dreams that we are all going to bow down. But special to note for me in the story was that the father took this to mind. In other words, he saw there was something to this dream. It was just not an ordinary dream. But so the story goes, as you go down the chapter, I'm not going to read everything. We find that Joseph is then sent by the father to look after his siblings, his brothers, who were out looking after the cattle far away. So he goes to check if they are well, and was charged by the father, "Come and give me word how they're doing." So he goes with some food, and he finds someone who directs him where he saw the brothers. And so eventually, when the brothers see him coming from far off, they conceive a plan and carry it out. That was, let's kill him. But eventually, as you would read the story, they did not necessarily kill him. They put up a plan, put him in a pit, and when the Ishmaelites came by, they sold him to the Ishmaelites. The Ishmaelites went with him. Now he's a slave. He goes into Egypt, and when they get to Egypt, they sell him to Potiphar's house. And Joseph is sold to the king of his family in Egypt, and he ends up in a palace somehow. He's from a pit, and he finds himself in a palace. This is a man who was supposed to have died in a pit at a tender age of 17. Of course, the brothers come up with a plan which they lie to the father with going home with this jacket, which was blood-stained, and claimed it would have been a wild animal that took the life of the young man. They knew they were just lying through their teeth to the father, and the father grieved the son so terribly for a long time. He grieved him. Little did he know that he was lied to. But cut the long story short, Joseph in a foreign land in Egypt, new language, new culture, new environment, new everything. The Bible gives on account that he chose to trust and believe in the God of his father. Now something comes up which I like. That is a choice that Joseph had to take. The fact that he was a teenager did not mean that he was not seeing what his father was living, the life of the father. It is so important that children look up to us as parents. So the custom that he saw at home, the belief system that he saw at home, it was engendered in his mind, young mind, such that he took up a position that he was going to believe in the God of his father. Now he personalizes God to him as his own God, no longer just the God of his father, but his own God. And from that, what I find very interesting and of importance and significant is the fact that now he makes decisions on his own, young as he was. And as you would know, you read chapter 38, 7, 38, going down to 39, he goes through a lot of hardship. He goes through a lot of temptations. Amongst others, as a slave, he did not have a choice. He was a property of another. They could do anything as they pleased. They could end his life as they seemed to own him in a way. It's a property that they owned, they purchased with their own money. But the Bible repeatedly says God was with Joseph. He prospered him in everything that he did, such that in Potiphar's house, he was quickly noticed that he was a young man of integrity, and he was given higher responsibilities in spite of that he was a slave. And suffice to say that the devil always has a plan up his sleeves to try and distract the children of God. So we find Potiphar's wife seemingly attracted by the fine, good-looking, handsome young man, and he tempts him to sleep with him. And the young man says, "How can I do such a terrible thing and sin against God?" I like those words in that they speak in volumes. That the issue at hand, as far as Joesph was concerned, was not committing adultery or committing fornication for him, but it was about God. Everything for him, with him, it revolved around the God of his father, the God that he chose for himself. And so, even though he sees this temptation, he realizes that right at that point in time, his life was in danger. By him refusing or to consent to what Potiphar's wife was asking him to do, it risked and bordered on the fact that he could lose his own life. But he seemed not to mind that much. So, as a matter of fact, he was so worried that how could he sin against God? And by choosing that, there was always a risk of him being killed. And we see, of course, Potiphar taking him to prison, and the rest is history. But he doesn't get killed. If it was otherwise, he could have been killed. But God consistently was with Joesph. Well, I can cite a number of things that Joesph did when he was in prison, how he helped two prisoners who had dreams and predicted what was going to happen later when he tells them how they must remember him when they're out. They don't. But in fact, God is the one who remembers Joesph. And at the right time, Joesph is released again. And the long story short, we find Joesph eventually restored, given more responsibilities. There is a great famine in the land of his father. Eventually they come, his brothers, and the long backwards and forward movements that happened there in between there without them even noticing it was him. Eventually the dreams that he had as a young man come to fruition, and they come to pass. So God predicted and foresaw what was going to happen to the young man at the right time. In spite of that, he was sold to the Ishmaelites first, then he was sold later to Potiphar's house, sold 2 times, as a slave 2 times, yet he rises from the pit to the palace. And in the palace as a slave, he is taken up another notch higher to positions of responsibility, higher responsibilities than the natives of Egypt. Instead, he becomes a responsible and an administrator who looks after the whole nation, and a second in command, as if you will, to the king. And he was a respected person, as if he was not a slave, as if he was not a foreigner. Such was the case with Daniel as well. What I'm trying to follow through in this thread is the fact that when God's finger points at you, you cannot run away, and God's will for you will be fulfilled. I learn a number of lessons, amongst others, in this story, is that God's plan for you will not fail. If you listen to his still soft small voice and follow through and become faithful, God will protect you. God will prosper you as he did Joesph. And his plan for you will come through. Regardless of your inherited dysfunctional family background, you can choose, like Joesph, that you want to take a different course and trust in God. You know, when I look at the story, what encourages me is that there is hope for everyone. Every single one of us, no matter where we come from, no matter how bad and terrible our background is, there is hope for everyone. We can change our lives. How so? By choosing Jesus. When we choose Jesus, we are on the winning side. He can break even those generational curses. He can break those things that we think they are a vicious cycle that keep on happening in the family. It can stop with you if you choose Jesus as a personal savior and choose to listen to him. So I want to encourage someone out there who may think that they are not worthy, or they may think that their life has come to an end. I can imagine how Joesph felt when he was sold as a slave, that he thought probably this is the end of it, or that's the end of me. I've got no hope after this. But he seemed as a fine young man, somebody who trusted God through it all. And through it all, God was carrying him. And eventually, he's reunited with his family. He's reunited with his father. The truth comes out, and his brothers' conceit is revealed. They are embarrassed. They apologize. There's a great reunion within the family. And the dreams that were dreamed of become true. They are confirmed true finally. What am I saying? I read about the 12 sons of Jacob, or the 12 sons of Israel, who is still Jacob. And the picture that I get from the Bible is that there will be 12 tribes of Israel that are represented by the 12 sons of Jacob. And amongst them is Joesph, who are going to be people with different characters, different backgrounds, different challenges that they would have gone through. And in a way, I take and I salute the fact that there is hope for every person, every one of us. Be encouraged. When I look at how dysfunctional Joseph's family, that is Jacob's family, his children, his wives, his own parents, beside his own family, there is a lot there. And I look at my family and I can identify with this family. And I am encouraged to know that there is hope even for me. So I want to encourage brothers and sisters that let us be reminded, be encouraged to know that no matter how bad our background, God has got our back. God will take us through when we take a decision to take him as our personal God and trust him to hold us by the hand and lead us each step of the way. He has promised never to leave us nor to forsake us. May you be blessed. Amen.